People say that friendship and money doesn't mix. It can be such a minefield. But I think the fact that friendship underlines our business is what makes it feel so successful in terms of managing our finances. Because ultimately, we're friends. We want the best for each other.
It's finding that kind of magic middle ground between the numbers and the feelings to do with finances and the business. It is just kind of practicing and communicating about it. You can't do those things in theory. You just have to do them in practice and then see what happens.
It definitely makes me feel much calmer about our finances to know that I'm never facing this on my own, no matter how good or how bad things might get in the future. There's another person by my side dealing with it as well. I think that probably makes us braver and probably better business owners generally.
A lot of money content will tell you to budget better, be more disciplined, manifest harder, and just hurry up and fix yourself. Because apparently you're always the problem to overcome. The Money Story Project is where we go deeper and wider into who we are, where we came from, what we've experienced and discovered along the way. Through honest, sometimes surprising, always deeply human conversations, personal stories and expert voices, helping us make sense of why money feels so complicated. I'm your host, Harriet Formby, chartered accountant, fractional CFO, trauma-informed finance coach, and insatiably curious about the human side of money. Today's episode is a special one. For the first time, I'm joined by two guests. We've got Holly Close and Sophie Bellamy, the co-founders of Good Egg. And Good Egg is a web design and copywriting studio. Holly leads on web design, digital strategy and tech, and Sophie leads on copy, content and SEO. They're both originally from Yorkshire in the UK, and they met a few years ago while working remotely overseas before going on to build the business together. Holly is now based in Vietnam and Sophie is based in Sheffield. Although you're actually somewhere else today, I think, aren't you, Sophie? And then in this episode, we're talking about money inside a co-founder relationship. So big welcome to Holly and Sophie, and perhaps just tell us where you are before we get into it as well.
So I am currently in Da Nang in Vietnam, which is where Sophie and I first met nearly 6 years ago. Now, I think it's like 6 years ago next week, maybe, that we both went to like a women's meetup cocktail bar that someone on a Facebook group organised, and our eyes locked across the room, and we both found out that we were from Yorkshire and in Vietnam, and then we've been great pals ever since.
Amazing. And Sophie, how about you?
Well, I'm based in the less glamorous Sheffield for the most part, but currently I'm in Sri Lanka on the south coast. I decided that I couldn't quite face the winter in the UK, so I'm spending 6 weeks here traveling and working remotely, and it's really nice to be back on the same time zone-ish as Holly for the first time in quite a long time. Our calls are at reasonable hours for both of us, and yeah, it's nice to feel a little bit closer, especially since it's nearly our anniversary, as you just mentioned, Hol.
6 years, yeah. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? Running your own business means you can travel and structure things how you want. So it's really amazing that you've come together working in this way. If we just start with a bit of like background then, I'd love to hear about your own experiences with money and relationship with money before Good Egg. If we start with Sophie.
Yeah, and so like going all the way back, my background is very sort of like money secure. Didn't really think about it much growing up. And then when I started making my own money, I was really frivolous for quite a while. And it took me a long time to sort of really get to grips with my money, I suppose. I think for probably a decade, if you have asked me how much was in my bank account, I wouldn't have been able to tell you. I was very like head in the sand, living day to day. And then probably about 4 years ago, so this was in the early days of Good Egg, when we were getting a little bit more serious about the business and obviously running our own finances within the business, I think getting into that habit got me into the habit of being more cautious with my own. So from there, I started having weekly money dates with myself and really drilling down into what my finances were looking like. So I think my own personal money journey has been a rocky road, but feels much more secure now, like back to sort of the beginning.
Yeah, it's interesting that I think a lot of people find that being in business gets you to look at your money, doesn't it? And maybe if it's something you've been avoiding in the past, it's like, well, now you have to look because there's a lot of money stuff in business, but it does get you to reflect on where you've come from with it and habits and things. Yeah. So how about you, Holly?
Yeah, so my relationship with money, I guess, in my sort of background is a bit different to Soph's because my dad is a writer, so he was like freelance through all of my childhood, which meant that our income as a family was like very up and down. My mum's a teacher, but she was on kind of maternity leave or part-time a lot because I'm one of 4 children, so she was looking after us quite a lot of the time. So we kind of really knew the feast and famine element of being in a freelance supported family when I was younger. So for most of my like early 20s and nearly into when I was 30, I was very adamant that I was never going to be freelance because I just couldn't deal with the money insecurity element of it. And I really thought all I wanted was just, a regular salary and feel safe and secure in my income. So I developed some good money habits through that time of like always putting money away and being quite sensible with my budget and stuff. But then I think the more I got to grips with what it is like to have a boss and to have to go to an office every day, the more it was like, maybe actually freelancing might be all right. There have been like, ups and downs of freelance income and things, but it's been much less stressful than I thought it was going to be, I think. But then I also do not have 4 children to look after. So I think that's a big difference between me and my dad.
Yeah. It's interesting that you've had that exposure to the freelance world, and it was something that seemed quite off-putting because of that instability of knowing what's going to come next. But actually, still, you've come full circle, and as many of us do, try the world of employment and realise that actually sometimes it's worth, I guess, giving up some of that stability for having your own autonomy and, decision making around things. So it's interesting that you've both had slightly different perspectives, coming into it. And so when you set the business up, be really interested to know like how much you maybe talked about money up front or anything that maybe you wish you'd talked about sooner. What's coming up for you?
So right in the beginning, I don't think we were necessarily taking the business seriously as a whole. And so finances were just in the background. We weren't really looking at them. It wasn't any of our business for quite a while. And then as the business has grown, like sort of in the first year or so, or maybe 2 years, to be fair, I think we got into a better habit of communicating about money and thinking a little bit more, probably not long term, but like short to early mid-term of what we were doing with our bank account, making sure we were being very transparent. I think one thing that we did do quite early on, which has served us really well, is we've sort of like vowed to each other to be transparent and communicative all the time. So we've got a rule that if it's like a difficult conversation and we're having a video call, we'll turn the camera off if we can't feel like we can talk about what we need to talk about, because talking about money can be hard. And I think figuring that out quite early, I don't know what you think, Hal, but that has made me feel much more secure as a co-owner of a business and a co-owner of a bank account.
Yeah, like I definitely think for the first 2 and a bit years of us running the business, we were basically operating like 2 freelancers with a shared bank account rather than like a holistic business with a financial plan and things. But that, I think in some ways that did really put us in like some good habits around like tracking where the income was coming from. We are both really both of us really value fairness, and that kind of comes through in all of the money chats that we have. Doesn't stop it being really awkward sometimes, as Soap said. I think we are getting better at having those conversations, but I don't know if it's like a British thing or a women thing, or if it's just a unique blend of all kinds of different stuff that makes it really awkward to have those money chats. But I think anything to do with finances was like, it didn't come up at all when we were talking about setting the business up. It was like, oh, what's that colour scheme going to be? Let's buy a domain name. Let's do this. So I think the only like finance thing that we really talked about was, having to put in that initial money in shares in the business. And our accountant was, just talked us through it. And then we were like, okay, great. And so just were like, oh yeah, I'm sure everything will be fine with the finances. So it wasn't something that, that really came up at all. And I think our accountant often finds us quite confusing because we have like our own specific like fair way of dividing up like dividends and sort of salary and stuff like that. And because she normally works with people who are maybe like husband and wife teams or something like that, where it would just be a 50-50 split, I think she sometimes is like, what are you guys doing? Why do you have all these spreadsheets where you divide stuff up? But it is just good for both of us to feel like neither of us is kind of taking advantage of the situation, and that we've always kind of got the receipts, I guess, for how we want to divide things up, because it's not like we both do the exact same thing. So the way that we kind of need to pay ourselves and split the money in the business is a bit different than if we were both just, two window cleaners or something.
Yeah, there's so much in that. Firstly, fairness is really important, because if it doesn't feel fair, there's going to be tension, isn't there? But fairness doesn't need to be a 50-50 split down the middle. Just because there's two of you doesn't mean that that's how it needs to be. And actually, I think what you're explaining is actually that it should be this way. You need to be able to vary the split and what's fair. People may have different input at different times, because of life and other things and the nature of the work. So it's really great that you've got a system for actually doing that you both feel is fair. Obviously, you've got to make sure it works in terms of the actual ownership and stuff with the dividends and things. But as long as that's all fine, then it makes sense. And a few episodes back, I was speaking with Nikki Coe, who is a co-founder coach. She was talking about one of the biggest things that causes failures is co-founders not seeing eye to eye on things, and really like that you found a way to have hard conversations. And I love that you found that you can turn the camera off. That's such an interesting idea, is actually how can you make it less confrontational, I suppose, isn't it? Is that what you found with turning the camera off, that actually that meant that you could sort of speak more freely? Or what kind of experience have you had with that?
Yeah, I can't remember a time whether we've actually ever had to do it, but I think it's more like knowing that is an option. That if I want to bring something up and I don't really know how to do it, that I can say to her, I feel uncomfortable, I feel awkward about this. Can I turn my camera off so we can have an open conversation? But I think up until now, as Hal said, we've got a million spreadsheets and we've got such a weird way of doing things that works for us. Obviously, fairness is really important, and transparency, and also flexibility. I think we've changed the way that we do things so many times now as the business evolves that we've kept it fair. So we haven't had to have any mega conversations. Yeah, as I said, I've actually forgotten any, Hal. Have we had some massive conversations that I've forgotten about?
No, I don't think so. I think there was maybe a turning point 2-3 years ago, when I think we were kind of in that transitional period when we were doing more projects together, where we were trying to figure out what that payment structure kind of looked like for both of us. And I think we both got really awkward talking about it. And that was when I think we were like, okay, if we need to have a conversation like this in the future, let's turn the camera off so that we're not they're staring at each other, being like, I don't know what to do. But I think ever since we then had that conversation, we then didn't need to use it, which is nice.
It's like you broke the ice on that sort of conversation, and now it sounds like it's quite an iterative thing, because I guess you must be in those spreadsheets quite often. Is that right?
Yeah, all the time. And we're quite, we're very diligent about tracking our time, both inside the business and on client work as well, which again has been helpful for that kind of fairness and transparency. But we've also recently been restructuring how we price projects. And that's been really useful data to have, because we do actually know how long the projects take us to do, rather than just being like, oh, I think it's this long. And then actually sometimes it's double that for some people, and sometimes it's half that for other clients. So it's been really helpful to kind of go, oh, well, actually the data says that it takes this long, and we can use that to make better informed decisions, rather than it just being like, abide.
Yeah, it gets you so far kind of having a gut feel for what something should take and what to price it. But actually having that data is so important, isn't it, to actually know what it's taken, especially if you're trying to sort of divvy up the work in a fair way, and know that you split things. Knowing how much people are working on different things must really, really help with that. Yeah. And you mentioned you started this with, Sophie not really paying loads of attention to finances and managing to get by without looking too closely. And then perhaps Holly had a bit more of a kind of, I don't know if nervousness is the right word, but like perhaps nervousness because freelancing was something that you'd seen like your parents navigating, and, the trials and tribulations of being a freelancer. And obviously you've got a shared bank account in the business because you're in business together. So what's that been like then?
I don't think we've ever really had any issues around having a shared bank account. Sophie sent me a voice note about it just before we came on the podcast to sort of say, oh, I was thinking about it, and we never really do kind of have any tensions around what's coming in and out of the business bank account. I guess the nice thing, again, from that kind of transparency perspective is because we do have like a very, modern app bank account, we do both get notifications when any kind of payments come in or out. So that's just really good for like, oversight of what is going on with the bank account and what we're spending and things. Not that I think either of us would ever like screenshot it and be like, what's this? But it's, it's just good that we've always constantly got that like eye on the ingoing and outgoing transactions. Because I think, if we were 10 years ago and you were having to wait till the end of the month to get a big paper statement. Like I remember when I used to have a job in an office, one of my tasks was always like going through the office bank statement and sort of divvying it up. And I'm so glad that we don't have to do that, because that was, did not enjoy that highlighting and wandering around the office asking people what they'd spent. But I think we've set some like boundaries around, if it's if we know it's going to be a big-ish expense, like more than 100 quid or more than 50 quid, then we'll just check in with the other person to make sure that they're happy that we're sort of spending that, just to make sure, if they're aware that we've got some outgoings that mean we need to have a bit more cash in the bank, then that's been quite helpful. And we've been really aligned, I think, on, buffers and saving for tax. We probably oversave on tax, but I think we're both very anxious about not being in a situation where we suddenly owe HMRC loads of money that we can't then give them. So yeah, it's not ever really been an issue. I think the main issue is like when we're based together in the same country, all of our like outings together are kind of tax deductible, so we just end up putting loads on the business account. So because we're not physically together an awful lot, we don't often have a lot of like, joint spends in that regard, but we are generally pretty aligned on using the bank account, I think. Do you feel like that's right?
Yeah, I agree with everything you've said. I think like having those few boundaries that we have put in helps keep things nice and clear. But I think the main thing really is like we both trust each other. We know that when things pop up on the banking app, it's going to be a legitimate spend. It's going to be fair always. We'll sometimes pop each other a message first just to say, this is about to come out. Just like if it's like a vendor that isn't a typical vendor, just so the other one knows that there hasn't been like a weird hack or anything. But yeah, I suppose it's like anytime you mix finances with people in your life, if you trust each other, it feels quite easy. And like I said to Holly on the voice note before, I was like trying to think of some peril, but there has been none. It's just, we're just very sensible bank account carriers, I think.
Yeah. It sounds like the transparency really helps. And I guess it helps that you're both prudent about putting money for tax. If there wasn't enough money for tax, I guess there would be more like conversations and kind of peril around it, but actually because you've both got that quite a similar outlook in terms of spending and like putting money aside and stuff. And yeah, that's the point. I guess it's a real perk of being in business with somebody, is that you can, have a semi-social outing, and it is a business meeting. So that's always a nice one, isn't it? So I know at the beginning we were just mentioning that you've had some conversations, even like in the last couple of weeks, that have been quite transformational around the business structure with finances and pricing and things. It'd be really great to hear a little more of what that entailed and how that conversation was.
Yeah, so I think we've known for probably quite a while that we might not have been charging enough for our services, but we hadn't necessarily sat down and looked at the data. As Holly said, we've got all of that data there, and we hadn't really dug into it. We hadn't really had a big conversation about it. We just knew that towards the end of last year, our workloads had really picked up. We'd got loads of new clients on board. The business looked like it was doing really well, but we were both still not coming away with an awful lot of cash. So we were like, there's something wrong here. So yeah, we've been having those conversations post-Christmas. And I think this has been really helpful for me because I think Holly has been a really a helpful guide for me, because I'm a little bit more nervous, I would say, to put prices up. I'm worried that if we put the prices up, we won't get the sales. But Holly's got a much clearer vision on the value that we offer and how much we are doing for that money that we're charging for our services and how many benefits there are within it. So I think that has definitely been a money block for me personally. But going into this year and having those conversations and looking at that data, it's been really, really helpful for me to sort of get past those blocks and think, actually, what we're doing is worth it. We've got decades of experience between us. This is how much we should be charging. So it's been, as well as a really helpful financial process, this pricing conversation we've been having, I think it's been a real moment of growth for me as well. I mean, it's all tangled up together always, isn't it, in business? I think you need to get past the mindset stuff before you can get onto the actual nitty-gritty of pound signs. But yeah, it's been really, really helpful. I think we've arrived at some numbers that still feel like they're fair and they're value-packed for our clients. Because again, fairness comes up in every element of our business. We want it to be fair for everybody. But also we want to feel valued as well and make the money that we feel we deserve to make. So yeah, it's been a really lovely, again, a great time to have a business partner, because I definitely wouldn't have put the prices up on my own. So I definitely needed another egg in my corner to get that pushed through.
Yeah, I've been really proud of you, Soph, for our pricing conversations, because I think last year, I think we'd kind of skirted around the topic of putting prices up for things. And I know you were very nervous about doing that. And then I think you said towards the end of the year, last year, oh, I need to stop pricing things like we're running a charity. And I was like, yes, okay, now's the time. We can start having these conversations. And like Soph said, the workload to cash ratio felt quite off. But it is just, really useful to have that person in the business who's a friend, and that they've got your best interest at heart, but also the best interest of the business at heart as well. So I think it is good for that kind of to have one of you where you're a bit more we can push a little bit more on this thing, even if the other person's oh, I'm a bit nervous. And I think that finance is one area, but it can happen on all kinds of sorts of things where one of us will get an idea and bring the other one along, and we'll just kind of trust that the other person has got our back on it, which is really nice. And the pricing conversation, I almost felt like I came in a little hard on it, because I'd done all these sums where I was this is what our actual wage per hour is. This is what other people are charging. And I came very fat-spaced for our chat on pricing. But I think you were very receptive to it. And it was good to have just receipts, I think, for doing the pricing, rather than it just being well, this number seems okay. Which I think is how we had priced quite a lot of stuff prior to this year.
Yeah. It's always that thing, isn't it? Is when you're going off feel and the insecurities are coming in, it's very easy to kind of go, no, we shouldn't do that. But actually, when you've got evidence well, do you know what? Our hourly rate is this. That sort of brings it into perspective when you realise that perhaps, things need to shift. And then it's such a powerful thing that you've been able to do that as a partnership and have that conversation, because it is scary. It's scary putting your prices up if you've got fears. It sounds like Sophie's got confidence from Holly's kind of confidence and, you know, enthusiasm around kind of digging into the detail and going like, no, this is where we need to be. And that's a real positive. And that's something you don't get when you're in business on your own, really. Well, you might do, because you may have support from people around you and advisors and, you know, other people similar position to you that are saying, yeah, put your prices up, whatever. But there's a real value there in having, you know, somebody in business with you that's helping you make the decision. But again, it seems like an example of having a hard conversation. Like that is a hard conversation. Like maybe one that you'd need to turn your camera off for if it wasn't good. You know, that is one of those situations where it's like, this could get awkward, I guess, couldn't it? Did you sort of intentionally schedule that in then to kind of go, right, it's 2026, we need to sort our pricing out? Or like, how did it come about?
Yeah, we did. We scheduled it in. We knew it was coming. We knew that we were going to have those conversations. And I think it could have been a more difficult conversation had Hull not come armed with facts, figures, charts, tables, like a full presentation of why what we were doing wasn't working for us. You can't argue with it. Just because I feel nervous to put prices up, Holly's got facts that say that we have to. So in those conversations, I think it almost is a non-conversation. Like, yeah, that's what's happening. We're doing that. And it really helped to stop me getting in my feelings. It was quite a straightforward conversation, really, wasn't it, Hal? We were like, okay.
Yeah. And I do think as well, like, you were in a more receptive mindset to talking about pricing than maybe if we'd had it at a different time, like a year before. But the facts and figures definitely helped. And I think because we obviously know each other so well and we know what our like financial goals and things are inside and outside of the business. So I could really come in and go, well, Sophie, if both of us want to do X, Y, and Z and earn this much, we can't be doing it at this price because there aren't enough hours in the day for us to work at that rate. So that's been really useful. And I think just, you know, to then use it as a sort of jumping off point to think about, well, if we wanted to scale the business at any point, we kind of need to factor some of that into the pricing if we want to outsource or kind of work with consultants or suppliers or whoever, then we need to factor that into the pricing as well. But it's such I think just pricing is such a difficult thing to like learn how to do within a business because there's so much stuff that you just don't factor in until the point almost where you're like, oh, we didn't factor in time for our own labour or pensions or any of the stuff like that. And then because there's two of us, even in my calculations, like Sophie pointed out, like, oh yeah, but if we're both going to be in meetings, we need to make sure that, you know, 2 hours of our time are covered because both of us are on the meeting at the same time. So there's, you know, there's just so much to think about and nobody teaches you how to do it in school. And so much of the pricing information, I think for small business owners, there doesn't really feel like there's a middle ground. It's like either people telling you like, this is how to max out your income for no hours at all, which doesn't feel very ethical or real, or people that are kind of, I don't know, doing it by the hour on Fiverr or Upwork or something, but there's not so much information about like, here's how to price according to your values and here's everything that you need to think about, or certainly not that I've found while I was doing any pricing research. So that it just feels really tricky, and I think that's why we did so much of it based on vibes, because it's like, I don't know what to include.
Yeah, and with project-based work, as in like yours, you know, presumably a lot of yours is clients that come along need something built, created, and then, you know, it's unique to what they're doing, so it's not necessarily an off-the-shelf package, or you may have some packages, I guess, around that as well. And then it's sort of like there is going to be some trial and error around experience. You've been doing it a few years now, but like you have to kind of, I guess, go through some painful projects to kind of work out, oh, actually we need to price this more now, because actually that sort of thing actually takes a lot longer. And it's those sort of things that probably can easily creep in, that if you don't factor in enough like buffer for those sort of meetings and stuff, that you can find you're in that position where it seems like, oh gosh, we're really busy, but there doesn't seem to be like loads of money coming in. So it is a difficult conversation, almost for anybody. But I think this is maybe an example of you having slightly different skill sets that you bring into the mix. Like Holly's come with a presentation, and if it had just been you both kind of going, let's talk about pricing, like where do we begin, it probably would have been a very different conversation. So it just shows that actually it seems to be that you bring complementary sort of perspective and skills to each other, which is great. You touched on it a minute ago. I really love this, actually, that you said you tied in like the pricing to, oh yeah, but if you want to do this and I want to do that, this is what it costs, and that's our goal. And that's so important, isn't it, to actually tie the finances to real personal goals that you've got, like for business and for your life. And obviously you've been in business for many years now, and I'm sure life has changed, and where you're living and all the different situations have changed. And it'd be really great to hear a little bit about how, as priorities have changed for you both, how that's affected the money side of things, and how your kind of requirements or aspirations from the business and money may have changed, and what that's been like in the partnership.
Yeah, I suppose I've had quite a big shift lately. So about a year and a bit ago now, I bought my first home back in Sheffield. And I'm on my own, so my mortgage is my responsibility. And all of a sudden I had all of these grown-up bills after spending the sort of 7 years before that just bouncing around the world, like having a really lovely time, spending what I earn, living quite frugally, and just sort of not really thinking so much about my financial responsibilities to present me and future me. And then when I settled back in the UK last year, and obviously my financial situation changed dramatically, it really made me get serious about our finances and what money looks like for me, like making sure that I've got enough to put away into short-term, mid-term and long-term savings, making sure that I can cover my bills every month. All of that is at the forefront of my mind. And I think personally now, like I swing wildly between like money anxiety, which I think is probably quite relatable to most people, whether freelance or not, and just feeling really in control of our money because it's made me sit up and pay a little bit more attention. So I think it's like going back to the pricing, that was probably the last part of the puzzle of figuring out how to be on top of our finances. We're good at analysing, we're good at tracking, we're good at making sure everything balances. The cash flow is always good. But yeah, going forward, the pricing was the bit that was missing. So yeah, the days of like early good egg when if we made some money, great. If we didn't make money, oh well. They're gone now, and I think it's been really beneficial. Again, everything loops in, I suppose. So, like having to be more serious about the finances has made me more serious about the business generally, and it's made me feel like a real business owner in a way that I perhaps didn't before. I think we've both really sort of sat more comfortably in that role over the past year, just from doing a lot of work generally. But I think it does tie into how we manage our finances and how our lives look both in and out of the business. So yeah, it's been a really crazy sort of 18 months of new worries, new priorities, new exciting challenges.
My life looks quite similar to when Sophie and I first met in a lot of ways, because I still live in Vietnam most of the time, and the cost of living here is very affordable. So my outgoings are a lot less than Soph's, and I live with my boyfriend Dom, so we kind of split those expenses between us. So yeah, our monthly rent is very low compared to if we were living in the UK. But I think that's just like another area where we just bring like balance to each other, I think, Soph and I. So even though we are in these like different financial situations now, I think it's meant that, when Soph was feeling stressed about the sort of new financial situation that she was in, because I wasn't in the same situation, I could sort of bring a bit of support and levity to that situation and sort of be able to support Sophie through that, rather than both of us being in a situation where we were like, oh my God, we've got no money. How are we going to both pay our mortgages? Like, I could be a little bit more relaxed in that scenario.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And I think like even practically, like sometimes when it's dividends time and we're waiting for invoices to get paid, so some of that money is still sat like in unpaid invoice piles, Hull will say like, will you take your bit first because you've got to pay your mortgage, and like we'll sort of like find the balance of the flow like that, which has been really. Yeah, I think the fact that we are in very different situations has actually been a massive benefit to our business. And yeah, as our lives change and the business grow, I'm sure we'll find that balance, sort of like peaks and troughs both ways. But so far, so good.
Yeah, that's really important, isn't it? That actually the business can support you both and you can support each other through different sort of changes and, different commitments. And actually, that's where the fairness side is really important, because fairness doesn't mean, like we said, the 50-50 split on everything. And like it actually means sometimes it's this and sometimes it's that, but we've got track of it and we've agreed it and we know what we're doing, and we've got flexibility to do that, and we've talked about it. And that seems to be the thing that really stands out, is just that you seem to have a very sort of open approach to that sort of communication. Because obviously some people could struggle with this, couldn't they? Yeah, I'm sure that some businesses wouldn't manage to make it to the 6-year mark because they wouldn't be able to have these, conversations and be able to adjust as life changes. So I think it's really great that you've got that, and it's something to be kind of admired as well. There's some amazing practices that you've got here that really seem to give you the resilience and also flexibility and support with each other, which sounds really, really amazing. Quick reminder that you're listening to the Money Story Project with me, Harriet Formby, your host. If today's conversation is making you think, feel, or knowingly nod along, please do share it and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. All the links are in the show notes. And I'd like to ask you both, just like, I'm sure we've touched on elements of this, but what is the best thing about being in business with your friend when it comes to money?
I guess it's just having that person who you trust and that you can rely on, and that you can have all the different types of conversations with, and know that you're kind of in a safe space to talk about finances and other things in whatever way you need to, and having space to kind of express all your feelings as well. Because I think a lot of the worry, I think, to do with money will come when you're just stuck in your head worrying about it and getting into a bit of a loop of anxiety where you feel like you can't get out. But to have someone who completely understands the business because you run it together, and to be able to go, oh, I'm a bit worried about this, and then the other person can go, okay, you don't need to worry about that because of X, Y, and Z, or, oh, yeah, that is a bit worrying. Let's figure out together how we can stop it being a worry and what we can do to change things for the future. It's magical. So it's just great running a business as your friend, I would say.
Yeah, amazing. I just thought it might be worth us mentioning for people that don't know, because you run a newsletter, the Highly Emotional Business Owner, is that right? And it seems like this ethos of kind of talking about your feelings and acknowledging what's going on, actually, that is really helping in so many ways around your business values and authenticity. But actually, it seems to be really important for the money side as well.
Yeah, I mean, when I was thinking about this question before our call, I was thinking about like how people say that friendship and money doesn't mix. It can be such a minefield. But I think the fact that friendship underlines our business is what makes it feel so successful in terms of managing our finances, because we both ultimately just like, we're friends. We want the best for each other. We want each other to feel happy at work, and nobody's trying to sort of money grab. So I think the best thing there is that friendship that underlines everything. And yeah, with regards to the newsletter name and the highly emotional element across all of our business, I think, yeah, like being feelings-led gals has really helped because it does make us communicate a lot more. And otherwise, I think if we didn't feel like we had permission to be open and honest and vulnerable with each other, I mean, God knows what our finances would look like, because we'd probably be avoiding them. I'd be back to my old patterns of avoiding all money conversations. Yeah, I suppose I hadn't actually thought about that, but I think like our highly emotional nature means that we're better business owners in a financial sense, as well as service providers, if that makes sense.
Totally. Like, I'm a big advocate that actually money stuff is about emotions and how you feel and expressing that and understanding that. And that's just as important as the spreadsheets and the details.
Yeah, I think it's finding that kind of magic middle ground, isn't it, between the numbers and the feelings. And I think we are, with practice, getting better at doing that really consistently now. And I think it's the same with all the stuff to do with like finances and the business. It is just kind of practicing and communicating about it and not beating ourselves up if things go a little bit wrong, or being kind to ourselves about how we approach things in the future. But you can't do those things in theory. You just kind of have to do them in practice and then see what happens, which can feel a bit scary. I think you wrote about that in your most recent newsletter, so that's coming out soon, that, you know, you're having to do a lot of stuff in public and it feels quite daunting sometimes. But once you've done it, it's all right.
Yeah, it's like that sort of growing pains thing, isn't it? Of like, you're not sure what's going to happen and you're having to put this out publicly at the same time. So you're getting exposure to feedback, and that can be quite scary.
Yeah, I think very similar to what Holly said, it's sort of sharing that entire journey, and the risks and the rewards are shared. So it's having somebody to talk to when things feel scary, but it's also having somebody to text when you see a new work agreement pop up in your inbox. It's just having somebody on your team all the time. And I think often that's why people end up hiring us, because they want somebody on their team for whatever requirement they have. But I just think we're really lucky to have that built into our business.
Yeah, it's a real sense of like teamwork, isn't it? And I wanted to ask you your thoughts on the podcast episode we had earlier in the series with Nikki Coe. And this was all about co-founder dynamics, because she's a co-founder coach. It'd be really interesting to hear your thoughts.
I think the main thing that I took away from it, which I found really interesting, and I think you kind of alluded to this maybe earlier, or maybe when we were having the pre-podcast recording conversation, with how a lot of co-founders, it's down to the communication that they end up kind of having to dismantle the business because they're not talking about things enough. And I think Sophie and I almost have the opposite issue. Like, we're just constantly in touch with each other, and it feels weird if we're like not talking about the business sort of over a few days or a few weeks. So I thought that was really interesting. And I thought it was interesting as well how she kind of reflected on how they'd started off as a 50-50 split on profits, but then that ended up feeling unfair. So I am really glad that, because of sort of the weird two freelancers with a shared bank account situation that we kind of started the business in, that we actually haven't ever done like a pure 50-50 split, and it's made us both feel that our work is being kind of valued in the way that it needs to be, rather than it just being like, oh, well, we run a business together, so it has to be a 50-50 split. So I thought it made me just grateful for kind of how we've ended up setting up a lot of the systems in the business. Kind of a quirk of good luck in a lot of ways. I don't think we sort of set out to set any of these up. It's just kind of through, I guess, being friends and wanting to be fair and wanting to be transparent. We've just come up with good systems by accident, really.
I guess the money side of it, it's like any relationship, it's about communication, isn't it? That's the important bit. And when any communication breaks down, that's when there's trouble. So it's no wonder that money and business is any different. So yeah, I think that's really good reflection. And the fact that you have such strong communication has meant that you quickly realised that actually it didn't suit you just being sort of two freelancers sat together. You actually started being, properly in business together, and you've had these discussions, and that's been the thing that's probably kept you going, among other things, for the 6 years, is being able to flex with different stages you're at and different priorities.
Yeah, and another thing that stood out was the note about talking about long term, and it made me realize that I mean, we haven't talked a lot about long-term finances in the business, but I think I also haven't given myself permission to think about long-term in my own brain. So it was a really nice reminder, and something that I want to chat about when we have our next meeting. Like, what does that look like for us? Because obviously it's slightly more difficult because we're not a traditional business. We don't necessarily have traditional lifestyles, and we don't really know what our lives will look like in the next year, never mind what the business will look like. But it just sort of brought up a lot of questions in me of, what does that look like? And do we need to think about long term a little bit more? So yeah, definitely sparked some internal conversations.
Yeah. So it's given you some thoughts on the longer term. And this is it. It's always iterative, these things, isn't it? There's always different phases, I suppose, that you're in. And especially coming up to the sort of 6-year anniversary of the business, it's always worth checking in with, we've done your big pricing, talk earlier this month. But yeah, so opportunities to check in with each other and think about, other aspects that perhaps you haven't covered, like the longer term stuff. I just wanted to also invite you to share, obviously, we've talked about Good Egg and the amazing what you do, but to tell us a little bit more about that. So how can listeners find you?
Yeah, so we offer services across web design, SEO, and copy and content, kind of blog writing and things. But our signature offer is our Squarespace website package, which is where we do the copy, SEO, and web design for a brand new Squarespace website for small business owners. And that can sort of range in size from sort of a 3-page site to a 5-page standard kind of classic site, and then bigger sites for growing businesses as well. We would also love for people to subscribe to the Highly Emotional Business Owner as well, which is our newsletter, which I'm sure, Harriet, you'll put it in the show notes, but it's just
definitely
goodegg.digital/newsletter. And we send out an email once a fortnight, just sort of, talking about what's giving us big feelings in our business, and share kind of pics of where we are in the world as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, definitely get in touch with the Good Eggs. And I can confirm that I'm on the newsletter list. And that's something I really resonated with, the idea of this kind of emotions first. And I think that's a real unique point about your business and your offering.
Oh, thanks
really,
so much,
really
Harriet.
love that.
Thank you. And I think
Thank you.
Often in tech and websites and things, people can be a bit emotionless in those zones. So I think it's nice to work with web designer, copywriter, SEO person that are excited and will use emojis in emails and don't use jargon all the time. That's one of our big bugbears. So yeah, we just love talking about our feelings, whether that's about feelings in life or feelings in business.
Yeah, love it. Really, really good stuff. Okay. Well, thank you both so much for joining me for this conversation. I've really, really enjoyed hearing more about your journey together. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please do consider leaving a review and sharing it with a friend. It means the world and helps more people find us. Links to everything we've mentioned and more about today's guests are all in the show notes. And if you've got a money story of your own to tell, we'd love to hear from you. Details on how to get involved are also in the show notes. See you next time.